The dog wasn't supposed to survive the night. Wedged beneath 200 pounds of collapsed concrete, its legs crushed its body, shaking so hard Noah could feel it through the ground. Before he even touched it, this animal had been there for days, alone, screaming into silence. And the only reason Noah stopped his patrol car at 2 a.m. on an abandoned industrial road was because his own dog Max slammed both paws against the window and refused to sit back down. What happened in the next 72 hours would change every life involved, including one that everyone had already given up on. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end. And drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. Noah Walker had been a police officer for 3 years, and he knew the difference between instinct and paranoia. He had learned to trust the first and ignore the second. But at 2:17 in the morning on a stretch of road that hadn't seen regular traffic since the old manufacturing plant closed down, what he felt sitting in that squad car wasn't instinct or paranoia. It was something quieter than both. Something that made his hands go still on the steering wheel before his brain had even processed why. Max did it first. The German Shepherd had been lying across the back seat with his chin on his paws, the way he always did in the final hour of a shift when the radio went quiet and the streets gave nothing back. Then without warning he was standing. Both front paws planted against the window, his breath fogging the glass, a low sound building in his chest that wasn't quite a growl and wasn't quite a whine. It was something between the two. Something urgent. "Easy," Noah said, glancing in the rearview mirror. "What is it, buddy?" Max didn't answer him with anything as simple as barking. He just pressed harder against the glass, his entire body rigid, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the embankment where the old bridge crossed the drainage channel. Noah pulled the cruiser to the shoulder and cut the engine. He sat for a moment listening. The industrial road was the kind of quiet that felt earned rather than natural. No wind, no traffic hum, no ambient city noise bleeding in from the neighborhoods a mile east. Just stillness, and beneath the stillness barely audible, something that made the hair on Noah's forearms stand up. A sound, faint and broken and desperate. He was out of the car before the thought fully formed. "Stay," he told Max. But Max had already begun pacing in the back seat, his nails clicking against the seat with barely controlled anxiety. Noah grabbed his flashlight and moved toward the embankment, his boots finding the slope of loose gravel and weeds that led down toward the underside of the bridge. The smell hit him before the light found anything. Damp concrete, rust. And underneath that, something organic and wrong. The smell of an animal in distress of an injury left too long without care. Noah swung the beam low, and what he saw stopped him cold. A German Shepherd. Large-framed, but devastatingly thin, its ribcage visible through matted fur, that had once been the kind of golden brown and black you only saw in show dogs or working animals. It was wedged between a section of collapsed concrete and a rusted steel support beam, its hind legs pinned completely. Its front legs scrabbling weakly at the ground, in a motion that wasn't going anywhere. It lifted its head when the light hit it, and its eyes caught the beam, and Noah felt something crack open in the center of his chest. The dog wasn't growling, it wasn't showing teeth. It was just looking at him with eyes that were exhausted past the point of fear that said in a language that needed no translation, "I have been waiting." I did not know if anyone was coming, but I waited anyway. "Hey," Noah said softly, crouching down immediately, dropping his voice to the tone he used with Max when the dog was anxious. "Hey, I see you. I'm right here." The dog made a sound, half whimper, half exhale, as if the act of being acknowledged had taken something out of it that it couldn't afford to lose. Noah was already on the radio. "Dispatch, this is Walker Unit 4. I'm at the old bridge off Industrial Road about half a mile past the Kellerman plant entrance. I need animal control and EMS at this location. I have a large dog, German Shepherd, badly injured legs pinned under debris. Copy. The dispatcher came back with a calm, practiced voice. Copy that, Unit 4. Animal Control ETA is approximately 40 minutes. EMS is tied up on a two-car accident on Route 9, but will redirect when available. You need backup. 40 minutes. Noah looked at the dog, looked at the concrete slab across its legs, looked at the shallow, rapid movement of its chest, each breath working harder than the last. Negative on backup, he said. Just get animal control here fast. He clipped the radio back to his shoulder and moved closer, keeping his body low, his movements slow. The dog tracked him with its eyes, but didn't pull back, didn't flinch, just watched him with that same exhausted, patient attention. You've been here a while, haven't you? Noah said. It wasn't a question. He could see it in the dryness of the dog's mouth, in the way its lips pulled slightly away from its teeth, not in aggression, but simply because it no longer had the moisture to keep them closed. It had been here days, not hours. Something in Noah's stomach turned hard and cold at the thought of that. Days. Under a bridge. Alone. In pain. And waiting. He reached out one hand, palm down, fingers relaxed, and held it 6 inches from the dog's nose. The dog leaned forward and pressed its face into his palm. Noah closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he opened them and got to work. The concrete slab was enormous. He could see that immediately, and he could see the angle of it, the way one corner had dropped first and created a partial void that had probably saved the dog's legs from being completely crushed. Though crushed and pinned were nearly the same thing at this point. The beam beside it had shifted enough to lock everything in place. Noah put both hands against the slab and pushed. It didn't move. He repositioned, found his footing in the loose gravel, braced his back against the support pillar, and pushed again. Nothing. Okay, he said to himself more than the dog. Okay, we're going to figure this out. The dog whimpered. I know, Noah told it. I know, but I'm not leaving you. You hear me? I'm not going anywhere. He went back to the cruiser and opened the trunk. He kept a short-handled bolt cutter, a pry bar, and a roadside emergency kit in a standard rack along the rear wall. He grabbed the pry bar, a bungee cord, and a reflective rescue blanket, and he was back at the bridge in under a minute. Max watched him from the back seat, standing perfectly still, now his eyes following Noah's every movement with an intensity that was almost eerie, as if the dog understood exactly what was happening 20 feet away, as if he were counting on Noah to get it right. The pry bar changed the equation. Noah wedged the flat end into the gap beneath the slab and worked it slowly, carefully adjusting the angle each time the concrete shifted even slightly. The dog never looked away from him. Every time the slab grated and scraped against the beam, the dog flinched, but it didn't pull, didn't thrash. It held itself as still as it could manage, as if it knew that panic would make things worse. That kind of control in an animal this badly hurt was not nothing. Noah noticed it and filed it away somewhere. You've had training, he said quietly, working the bar again. Haven't you? This isn't your first hard night. The dog blinked at him. Yeah, Noah said. Me neither. The slab moved 2 inches, then 3. The dog made a sharp sound and then went immediately quiet, biting down on the noise like someone trying not to scream. Almost, Noah told it. Stay with me. Almost. His arms were burning. His shoulders felt like they were tearing loose from their joints. The pry bar had slipped twice and taken skin off his right palm both times, and he could feel the heat of the blood on his fingers, but he did not stop. He repositioned once more, drove the bar deeper, shifted his weight, and threw everything he had left into a single sustained push. The slab moved. It ground sideways with a sound like something being torn out of the earth, and the dog yelped sharp and loud, and for one terrible half-second, Noah thought he had made it worse. But then he looked down, and the legs were free. Both of them. Trembling violently, tucked partially under the dog's body, but free. The dog collapsed forward onto Noah's chest. Noah caught it. Dropped to both knees in the gravel, and just caught it, both arms wrapping around an animal that was shaking so hard it felt like it might come apart. He held on. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He just held on. "You made it," he finally said. "You made it." He carried the dog up the embankment and laid it carefully on the back seat beside Max. Max, who had never once been asked to share his space in that car, pressed his nose gently against the stranger's face and then lay down beside it without a sound. As if he had already decided. As if some conversation between them had already taken place in a language Noah didn't speak. Noah got behind the wheel and looked in the rearview mirror at the two of them. The injured dog's eyes were still open, still watching him. He pulled onto the road and drove. He didn't know the dog's name. He didn't know where it had come from, or who it belonged to, or how it had ended up pinned under a collapsed bridge on a road that nobody used at 2 in the morning. He didn't know what the next few hours would look like, or whether the dog would still be alive by the time the sun came up. What he knew was that the dog had pressed its face into his hand. What he knew was that it had trusted him before it had any reason to. And that to Noah Walker was not a small thing. That was in fact everything. He pressed down on the accelerator. The lights from the next town appeared on the horizon, and he drove toward them with both hands steady on the wheel, Max warm and solid in the seat behind him, and a stranger who had survived something he didn't yet understand, lying quietly beside his dog breathing. Just breathing. And for now, that was enough. Dr. Lily Thomas did not look up when Noah came through the back entrance of the Maplewood Veterinary Emergency Clinic. She was already at the examination table, already pulling on gloves, already moving in that efficient no-wasted motion way that told Noah she had been doing this for a long time and had learned to read the situation before anyone said a word. She had seen Noah carry animals in before. She knew by the set of his jaw and the blood on his right hand that this was not a routine call. "Put him here," she said, patting the table. Noah laid the dog down as carefully as if it were made of something fragile. The dog's eyes stayed open, tracking the room, tracking Noah's face, but the trembling had shifted from violent shaking to a deep internal vibration that was somehow worse to watch. Dr. Thomas had her stethoscope on the dog's chest before Noah had even stepped back. "How long under the debris?" she asked without looking up. "I don't know." "Days from the look of it." "At least 2, she said flatly. "Possibly 3. Severe dehydration. Body temperature is low." She moved her hands carefully along the dog's spine, its rib cage, its hindquarters. The dog made no sound. It just kept watching Noah. Hind legs have feeling. That's significant. If this were a spinal injury, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. "But the legs are not broken," she said. "Compressed, swollen. He was pinned in a position that cut circulation but didn't shatter bone." She straightened and looked at Noah directly for the first time. "You got him out fast enough. Another 12 hours and we'd be talking about amputation." The word landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Noah pulled a chair to the edge of the table and sat down. He put his hand near the dog's face, not touching, just present, and the dog pressed its nose against his knuckles the same way it had done under the bridge. The same deliberate movement, the same quiet certainty. "He trusts you," Dr. Thomas said, watching. "He trusted me before he had any reason to." She looked at the dog for a moment and then went back to work setting up a fluid line with practiced hands. "That's not nothing, you know. A dog that's been through trauma, that's in that much pain, shutting down that completely, and it still reaches for the person trying to help it." She shook her head slightly. "That tells you something about the dog, and something about you." Noah didn't answer that. He watched the IV line run clear fluid into the dog's foreleg, and watched the animal's breathing slowly begin to even out, and he thought about how the dog had held itself still while Noah worked the pry bar. How it had bitten down on a yelp. How it had kept its eyes on him the entire time, like Noah was the only fixed point in a world that kept collapsing. "I'm going to name him Shadow," Noah said. Dr. Thomas paused. Then she wrote it on the intake chart without commenting. The night passed in increments. Noah called in to dispatch and logged the rescue. His supervisor, Sergeant Frank Diaz, picked up on the second ring, despite it being past 3 in the morning, which told Noah the man never actually slept, just waited for something to go wrong. "You hurt?" Diaz asked first. That was always first with Diaz. Scraped hand. Nothing. The dog. Alive. At the clinic with Thomas. There was a pause on the line. Diaz had been on the force for 22 years and had the kind of silence that communicated more than most people's full sentences. "You're staying there." "Yeah." "Of course you are," Diaz said, and there was something in his voice that wasn't quite warmth but was adjacent to it. "Log it as animal welfare follow-up. I'll cover the shift notes." "Sarge, go take care of your dog Walker." Noah started to say Shadow wasn't his dog. He stopped himself. He didn't know why. He just stopped and said goodnight and hung up. Around 4 in the morning, Shadow's shaking stopped. Dr. Thomas came in from the back room where she'd been reviewing x-rays, and she looked at the dog and then at Noah and said, "His vitals are stabilizing. The fluid is helping. He's going to make it through the night." Noah let out a breath he had apparently been holding for 2 hours. "I need you to understand," she said carefully, sitting down across from him, "that he has a long road. The muscle damage in those hind legs is going to need rehabilitation. He won't walk normally for weeks, maybe longer. And we have no idea what his psychological state is going to look like once the shock wears off and he starts processing what happened to him." "I know." "You're planning to take him home, aren't you?" It wasn't a question either. Apparently, everyone around Noah had stopped asking him questions and started just reading him directly. "I don't even know if he has an owner," Noah said. "I'll run the check in the morning. Microchip registration, missing dog reports. And if there's nothing..." Noah looked at Shadow. Shadow looked back at him. Max, who had been lying quietly in the corner on a folded blanket that one of the vet techs had put out for him without being asked, lifted his head and looked between the two of them like he was following a conversation. "Then I figure it out," Noah said. He fell asleep in the chair sometime after 5. He didn't mean to. He was rubbing Shadow's ear with 2 fingers the way he did with Max when the dog was restless, and then somewhere between one breath and the next, the exhaustion pulled him under. He woke up at 7:15 to the sound of Dr. Thomas's voice, sharp and low, speaking to someone in the hallway. He came awake fast, the way cops do, from 0 to fully alert in under a second. He was on his feet before he had consciously decided to stand. He heard a second voice. Male, older, urgent in a way that sounded practiced, controlled, like someone who had learned to keep urgency from becoming panic, because panic cost lives. Noah stepped into the hallway. The man standing at the reception counter was somewhere in his 50s, solidly built with close-cut silver hair and the particular way of standing that Noah recognized from other veterans he'd known on the force. Not stiff, just precise. Every part of the body accounted for, nothing wasted. He was holding a piece of paper, and he was showing it to Dr. Thomas, who was holding it with both hands and reading it with an expression Noah couldn't quite interpret from this angle. "I need to know if the dog that was brought in last night matches this description," the man said. Male German Shepherd, approximately 7 years old, scar on the left shoulder from surgical repair in 2019. Answers to the name, Rex. Noah's feet stopped moving. Dr. Thomas looked up from the paper and saw Noah in the hallway. Something passed across her face. A kind of careful neutrality that she was putting on deliberately, which meant the thing underneath it was not neutral at all. "Sir," she said slowly, "can you tell me your name?" "Daniel Reyes," the man said. "Sergeant Daniel Reyes, retired. The dog was my K-9 partner. We were separated during a unit transfer 3 years ago. I've been looking for him since." The hallway went very quiet. Noah took one step forward, then another, because his legs were moving before he'd made any decision about what to say or do. He came to stand beside Dr. Thomas and looked at the photograph the man was holding. A German Shepherd, healthy and alert, sitting beside a uniformed soldier in front of a vehicle Noah didn't recognize. The dog in the photograph had golden brown and black fur and eyes that looked directly into the camera with the same kind of steady, unflinching attention that Noah had been on the receiving end of for the past 5 hours. His mouth went dry. "Where did you hear about the dog?" Noah asked. Reyes turned to look at him, took in the uniform, the scraped hand, the look on Noah's face that was probably giving away more than Noah intended. "Police scanner. My nephew works dispatch 2 counties over. He forwarded me the call log. German Shepherd found under a bridge off Industrial Road." His jaw tightened. "That road runs half a mile from where Rex went missing. I've driven it 100 times looking for him." 3 years, Noah said. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days, Reyes said. He said it without any drama. Just as a fact, the way you stated a fact that you had been carrying so long, it had worn smooth. After the transfer fell apart, the contractor handling the animals said he'd been placed with a civilian family. That family said he'd run off. Nobody filed a report. Nobody followed up. Something moved through his expression that was controlled and cold and very old. He fell through every crack there was. Dr. Thomas put the photograph down on the counter. She looked at Noah. "The surgical scar," she said quietly. "I noted it on intake, left shoulder." The air in the hallway changed. Noah thought about the dog under the bridge who had not growled, had not fought, had held itself still through things that should have broken its nerve completely. He thought about the way it had pressed its face into his hand. He thought about the way Max had lain down beside a stranger without being asked, as if he had recognized something in the animal that Noah's human eyes had missed. He thought about the name he had written on the intake chart at 4 in the morning. Shadow. He had named a dog that already had a name. A dog that had been called Rex by a soldier who had spent 3 years and 2 months driving roads in the dark looking for it. "He's alive," Noah said. His voice came out steadier than he expected. "He's in rough shape, but he's alive." Reyes went very still. The controlled, precise stillness of a man who has trained himself not to react before he has full information. But something happened in his eyes that he couldn't control and didn't try to. "I want to see him," Reyes said. "I know," Noah said. "But I need you to understand what you're walking in to see because it's not what you remember. He's been through a lot. He's weak. He's been without food and water for days. His legs are damaged. He's going to look different. I know what a dog looks like after a field injury." Reyes said quietly, "I've seen it. I can handle it." Noah nodded once. He turned and walked back down the hallway toward the room where Shadow was sleeping, and he heard Reyes's footsteps fall in behind him, steady and measured the walk of a man who had been moving toward this moment for 3 years without knowing if it would ever come. Noah pushed the door open and stepped aside. Reyes stopped in the doorway. The dog on the table was sleeping, its chest rising and falling with the slow rhythm of something finally exhaustedly at rest. The IV line ran clear. Max was still in the corner, head up now, watching the new person with alert eyes. Then Shadow's ear moved. Just one ear. A small involuntary twitch, the kind a dog makes in sleep when a familiar sound reaches it from a long distance, as if some part of the animal's nervous system had already processed what the rest of it hadn't woken up to yet. Reyes made a sound that was not a word. He crossed the room in 3 steps and crouched beside the table, and he put his hand on the dog's face and he said very quietly, "Rex." The dog opened its eyes. And Noah Walker, who had not cried in longer than he could remember, turned around and walked back into the hallway and stood there alone for a moment, with his hand pressed flat against the wall, just breathing. Just breathing. Because some things you witness, and you don't try to make them into anything. You just let them be what they are. Noah gave them 7 minutes. He stood in the hallway with his back against the wall and counted them in his head, not because he was timing anything, but because he needed something to do with his hands and his mind that wasn't walking back into that room. 7 minutes felt like the right amount of time to give a man and his dog. Not enough to fix 3 years, just enough to begin. When he pushed the door open again, Reyes was sitting on the floor beside the examination table, with his back against the cabinet and Rex's head resting on his knee. The dog's eyes were open and fully alert now, the IV line still running. Max still watching from the corner with his chin on his paws. Reyes had one hand moving slowly through the fur behind Rex's ear, and he wasn't saying anything. He didn't need to. Noah pulled the chair up and sat down quietly. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Reyes said without looking up, "You stayed with him all night." "Yeah." "You didn't have to do that." "I know." Reyes looked up then. He had the kind of face that had been through weather, not just years. Lines around the eyes that came from squinting into hard light and harder situations. He looked at Noah the way veterans sometimes looked at each other, like they were reading a file that hadn't been written down anywhere. "How long on the force?" 3 years. "Military before that?" Noah shook his head. "No, my brother was. 2 tours. Reyes nodded slowly, as if that answered something he hadn't asked aloud. "Rex and I were together for 4 years before the deployment ended. Explosive detection. He was the best dog I ever worked with, and I've worked with a lot of dogs." He paused. "When they told me he'd been placed with a civilian family, I believed them. I shouldn't have believed them." "What do you mean?" Reyes's hand slowed its movement through Rex's fur. The contractor who handled the transition was a man named Gerald Fitch. Private logistics company held the contract for animal transfers when units rotated out. I've since found out that Fitch had a pattern of cutting corners. Dogs that were supposed to go to approved adoption programs sometimes didn't make it through the paperwork the way they were supposed to. Noah sat forward in his chair. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that some of those dogs were sold," Reyes said flatly. "Not placed, sold. To private security firms, to handlers who didn't ask questions, to whoever was willing to pay for a trained military animal without going through official channels." His jaw tightened. "I filed complaints with 3 separate federal agencies over 18 months. You know what I got back? Paperwork. Lots of it," Reyes said. "All of it saying the same nothing in different fonts." Noah felt something shift inside him. The picture that had been forming in his mind since the hallway, the one where Rex had simply gotten lost in a bureaucratic shuffle, rearranged itself into something harder and darker and much more deliberate. He looked at the dog on the table. The dog that had spent 3 years on the street, or wherever it had been before the bridge, surviving on whatever it could find. Its training intact, its trust intact, waiting without knowing what it was waiting for. "Someone sold him," Noah said. "That's what I believe," Reyes said. "And then whoever bought him either couldn't handle him or didn't want the liability of a dog that was too well trained to be controlled by someone who didn't know what they were doing, so they got rid of him." He said it the way you said something that had been eating at you for so long that the words had gone numb. "And he ended up under that bridge." The room was very quiet for a moment. Then Dr. Thomas appeared in the doorway. She looked between the two of them and read the atmosphere accurately enough to keep her voice level. "I've been making some calls," she said, "about the microchip." Noah looked at her. "And?" She came in and closed the door behind her. "Rex is chipped. The chip registration in the national database shows his last recorded owner as a company called Vantage Security Solutions, based out of a warehouse address in Columbus. I looked them up." She paused. "The company dissolved 8 months ago." Reyes stood up. Not fast, not dramatically. Just stood with the careful, deliberate movement of a man who had just received information that confirmed what he already knew and despised. "Vantage," he said. "That name has come up before." "You know them?" Noah asked. "They were connected to Fitch, not directly. 2 degrees of separation, maybe 3. But the name came up in some of the documents I managed to pull before the agencies stopped returning my calls." He looked at Dr. Thomas. Is the chip still registered to them? Technically, yes, which creates a legal complication. She said it carefully, choosing each word. If someone from that company or anyone claiming to represent its dissolved assets were to make a claim on the dog, the company is dissolved, Noah said. Dissolved doesn't always mean gone, Reyes said quietly. It means the people moved somewhere else. Noah stood up. His chair scraped back against the floor and the sound was louder than he intended in the small room. Rex lifted his head off Reyes's knee ears, rotating toward Noah, tracking him. Noah looked at the dog, and then at Reyes, and then at Dr. Thomas, and he made a decision the way he sometimes made decisions on patrol, in the space between one breath and the next, when there was no time to think it all the way through, but the direction was clear. Nobody is taking this dog, he said. Not today. Not while he's on that table. Dr. Thomas looked at him steadily. I agree with you. Medically, he cannot be moved. I will document that in writing if necessary. I need a favor, Noah said to her. I need you to contact the chip registry and flag this animal as under veterinary hold pending legal review of ownership. Can you do that? I can do that by 9 a.m. Do it now. She left the room without another word. Reyes watched her go and then turned to look at Noah with something that might have been surprise if it hadn't been mixed with something else. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. You know this might get complicated, he said. If Fitch or anyone connected to him decides to push back, then it gets complicated, Noah said. I've dealt with complicated. Reyes almost smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but it was real. Yeah, he said. I can see that. Rex made a sound. Both of them looked at him. The dog was trying to sit up. His front legs were working, pushing against the table, the IV line tugging slightly at the insertion point. His hind legs trembled, but they were moving, both of them slow and uncertain, but moving. Easy, Reyes said, immediately dropping back down beside him. Easy, Rex. You're okay. Stay down. The dog stopped pushing. It looked at Reyes. Then it looked at Noah. Then it lay back down slowly, as if it had simply been checking that both of them were still there, and having confirmed it no longer needed to go anywhere. Noah exhaled. It was just past 8 in the morning when Sergeant Diaz showed up. Noah heard his voice in the reception area before he appeared in the doorway, the big man filling the frame, taking in the room with the flat, comprehensive scan of someone who had been assessing situations for 2 decades. His eyes moved from the dog to Reyes, to Noah's scraped hand, and then back to Noah's face. You look terrible, Diaz said. Thank you, Sarge. Who's this? He nodded at Reyes. Noah introduced them. Diaz listened to the abbreviated version of Reyes's story with the focused, unreadable expression he wore when he was deciding how much trouble something was going to be and how much of it he was willing to absorb. When Noah finished, Diaz was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Vantage Security Solutions. Reyes straightened slightly. You know the name. I know a name that rhymes with it, Diaz said. About 18 months ago, we had a case in the county involving an animal cruelty complaint. 2 trained dogs, both showing signs of prior professional handling, found in a property connected to a logistics company in Columbus. Case got handed up to the state AG's office and then went quiet. He looked at Reyes. We were never told why. The 3 of them stood in the room with that sitting between them. Someone shut it down, Noah said. Someone applied pressure, Diaz said. Which isn't the same thing, but it rhymes. He crossed his arms. What I'm hearing right now is that the dog on that table has a documented military service history, a legitimate prior handler with verifiable credentials and a chain of custody that involves a dissolved company with a history of questionable practices. He paused. That's not a civil matter. That's a federal one. I've tried federal, Reyes said. Multiple times. You tried it alone, Diaz said, without a sitting police officer who found the animal on a rescue call and has departmental documentation of the recovery. He looked at Noah. You filed everything. logged the call, filed the animal welfare report. Dr. Thomas is putting the veterinary hold in writing. Diaz nodded slowly. The look on his face was the one Noah had only seen a handful of times when Diaz had made up his mind about something, and the decision was final. "I'm going to make a call," he said. "I know someone at the FBI field office in Columbus. We went through training together 20 years ago. He owes me a conversation." He pointed at Noah. "You go home, sleep for 4 hours, shower. Come back." "I'm not—" "That is a direct order, Walker. You're no good to this dog or this man if you collapse in a hallway." He pointed at Reyes. "You, stay if you want. Thomas will let you." Reyes nodded once. Diaz left. His footsteps down the hallway were heavy and deliberate, and then the front door opened and closed. Noah looked at Reyes. Reyes looked at Noah. "He's going to help," Reyes said. It wasn't quite a question. "Yeah," Noah said. "When Diaz decides something, it gets done." Reyes looked down at Rex. Rex was watching the door where Diaz had been, ears slightly forward, reading the room the way trained dogs did, cataloging the energy of every person who came and went. 3 years, Reyes said quietly. "I made 100 calls. I drove these roads on my own time. I filed reports that went nowhere. And then some cop and his dog find Rex under a bridge at 2 in the morning, and 48 hours later, we're talking to the FBI." "Timing," Noah said. "It's more than timing," Reyes said. He looked at Noah, and the control he kept over his expression had slipped just enough to show something raw and exhausted underneath it. "Why did you stop last night? That road is empty. It's not on your regular patrol route. The call log shows you were already past it when you turned around." Noah thought about it. Thought about Max slamming his paws against the window. Thought about stopping the car without knowing why. "My dog told me to," he said. Reyes was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Max in the corner, who was already looking back at him with that steady, patient attention. "Good dog," Reyes said softly. Max's tail moved once. Just once. Noah put his hand briefly on Rex's flank and felt the warmth of the animal beneath his palm, the breathing that was stronger now than it had been 4 hours ago, the legs that had moved of their own accord. He thought about what Diaz had said, what Reyes had said about Fitch, about Vantage, about cases that went quiet. He thought about 2 trained dogs found in a Columbus property and a complaint that got handed upward and then disappeared. Rex wasn't the only one. That was the thought that hit him at the door. He turned back without meaning to, and Reyes looked up at him from the floor, and Noah said it aloud because it needed to be said. Rex wasn't the only dog Fitch moved through that company. Reyes held his gaze. "No," he said. "He wasn't." "How many—" Reyes didn't answer immediately. He looked down at Rex. He put his hand on the dog's head in a gesture that was both tender and deliberate, like a man pressing his palm against something real, to remind himself it was there. "That," he said, "is exactly the right question." Noah slept for 3 hours and 40 minutes. Not 4 the way Diaz had ordered, because his phone rang at 11:14 a.m., and the number on the screen was Diaz's direct line, and Noah was sitting up and answering before the second ring finished. "Get back here," Diaz said. No preamble, no greeting. "What happened?" "Someone called the clinic this morning asking about a German Shepherd brought in last night. Didn't leave a name. Dr. Thomas told them she couldn't confirm or deny any patient information, and the caller hung up." Noah was already on his feet, moving toward his keys. "Fitch. Or someone working for him. Either way, the window we have to move in just got smaller." A pause. "I talked to my contact at the FBI. He wants to meet. Today. But Noah—" Diaz used his first name, which he almost never did, and that alone made Noah stop moving for half a second. "There's something else. Something my contact told me that changes the shape of this thing considerably. I'm not going to tell you over the phone." The call ended. Noah drove faster than he should have through residential streets he knew well enough to navigate on reflex. his mind running ahead of him, pulling at threads. Someone had called the clinic, which meant someone had been monitoring either the dispatch logs or had a contact inside the department who flagged the call from the previous night. Both possibilities were bad. The second one was worse. He pulled into the clinic parking lot at 11:41 and walked through the front door to find Reyes standing in the waiting area with his arms crossed and an expression that said he had also received news and was processing it the way former military men process things they didn't like, quietly, completely, with no visible wasted energy. "You heard," Noah said. "Thomas told me about the call." Reyes's voice was level. "I've been thinking about who knew I was coming here. I told no one. I came straight from my motel when I heard the scanner traffic." "Which means the leak isn't on your end. It's on yours," Reyes said. Not as an accusation. Just as a fact stated plainly the way men who have operated in hostile environments stated facts that were inconvenient but necessary. Noah felt the words land squarely. He didn't push back against them because there was nothing to push back with. The dispatch log from last night was accessible to anyone with a departmental login. The animal welfare report he'd filed was in the system. It wasn't classified. It wasn't protected. Anyone who knew where to look and had a reason to look could have found it by 6 in the morning. He went down the hallway to Rex's room. The dog was sitting up. Not fully. Not with any confidence in the hind legs yet, but the front half of him was upright, and when Noah came through the door, his ears went forward and his tail moved twice in slow, deliberate arcs. 3 hours ago, the dog had been struggling to lift its head. Now it was tracking the door. Dr. Thomas was making notes at the small desk in the corner. She looked up. "His temperature is normal. He ate this morning. Not much, but he ate." She set her pen down. Whoever called wasn't from a rescue organization. The way they asked the question, they wanted to confirm the dog was here, not inquire about its welfare. There's a difference, and I've been doing this long enough to hear it. Did they say anything specific? Anything that might tell us how they knew? They said they were following up on a stray report from the industrial road area. She paused. "We don't receive stray reports. That's not how this works. Someone told them to call here specifically." Noah crouched beside Rex and put his hand on the dog's neck. Rex leaned into it steady and warm. "Okay," Noah said quietly. "Okay. We're not going to let that happen." He didn't know if he was talking to the dog or to himself. Maybe both. Diaz arrived 12 minutes later with a man Noah had never seen before. Someone in his early 50s in plain clothes with the particular energy of a federal agent that had nothing to do with how he was dressed, and everything to do with how he moved through a room like he had already assessed it before he walked in. He introduced himself as Special Agent Warren Cole, FBI Columbus Field Office. They gathered in the small break room at the back of the clinic, the 5 of them, Noah and Diaz and Reyes and Cole and Dr. Thomas, because Thomas had made clear that it was her clinic, and if this conversation was happening under her roof, she intended to be in it. Cole sat down across from Reyes and looked at him for a moment in silence. Then he said, "Sergeant Reyes, I've seen your name before." "I filed complaints with your office twice," Reyes said. "I know. Those complaints were routed to a unit that handles civilian contractor oversight. They were reviewed and flagged for follow-up." Cole paused. "The agent assigned to follow up was a man named Paul Garrett. He retired 8 months ago. What I found out this morning is that Paul Garrett, since retiring, has been doing consulting work for a private security firm." Nobody in the room said anything. "The firm is called Meridian Group," Cole continued. "Based in Cincinnati. Meridian Group's primary contracts over the past 4 years have included providing trained security animals to private clients. Their procurement records, which I have been looking at since 7 this morning, include 18 dogs over a 3-year period. 12 of those dogs are military-trained or law enforcement-trained animals." He opened a folder he had carried in and laid a single sheet of paper on the table. 3 of the 18 are listed in military service records as having been lost in transfer. Rex is one of them. Reyes leaned forward. His hand was flat on the table, and Noah could see the tendons working in his forearm. Who is running Meridian? Formerly, a man named Stephen Calloway. Formerly a logistics contractor. No direct connection to Fitch on paper. Cole's expression didn't change. But Fitch's wife's brother sits on Meridian's board of directors. Has since the company's founding. That's the connection, Noah said. That's one of them, Cole said. The other is Garrett, an active FBI agent who received Reyes's complaints and buried them and who is now on Meridian's payroll. He looked around the table. What I'm describing to you is a federal conspiracy involving the theft and trafficking of government-trained military animals, obstruction of investigative process, and possible corruption of a federal officer. This is not a small thing. Diaz had been silent the whole time. He was looking at Cole with the steady, appraising look of a man deciding how much he trusted what he was hearing. "Why are you bringing this to a clinic in Maplewood?" he asked. "If you've had this information since this morning, you've had enough for a warrant." "I have enough for a warrant on Meridian," Cole said. "What I need is the dog." Everyone looked at him. Rex is the only currently living animal with a verifiable military chip whose records place him inside Meridian's system and whose current location is documented and secure, Cole said. "He's evidence. He's also the clearest link between Fitch and Calloway and Garrett that doesn't exist only on paper." He looked at Reyes. "I need you to formally reestablish your claim as Rex's prior legal handler of record. Today. In writing." That filing, combined with the veterinary documentation and Officer Walker's rescue report, creates a chain of custody that the defense cannot break. It establishes that the dog was unlawfully transferred and unlawfully held, which supports the trafficking charge. Reyes was quiet for a moment. "And after you execute the warrant and arrest whoever gets arrested, what happens to Rex?" "That determination would be made through the courts," Cole said. "That's not an answer." Cole looked at him steadily. "I know." Reyes turned to look at Rex, who was visible through the glass panel of the break room door, lying on his table, with Max stretched out on the floor beneath him, the two dogs breathing in the same quiet rhythm. He looked at them for a long time. Then he turned back. "I'll sign whatever you need," he said. "But I want something on record. I want my formal reapplication for custody submitted simultaneously with the chain of custody filing, so there's no gap, so no one can argue the dog is unassigned at any point in the process." Cole nodded. "I can work with that. Work with it or commit to it." A beat. Commit to it. The paperwork took 90 minutes. Cole worked from a secure tablet. Reyes signed 3 separate documents. Dr. Thomas provided her veterinary hold documentation and signed her own statement, and Noah wrote and submitted an addendum to his original rescue report that explicitly noted the discovery of the military chip data and the Meridian connection as part of the active investigation. Diaz countersigned it as supervising officer. At 1:45 p.m., Cole stepped outside to make calls. Noah went and sat with Rex. The dog was calmer than it had any right to be. It lay with its head resting on the edge of the examination table and watched Noah with the patient, attentive gaze that Noah had come to understand was simply how Rex engaged with the world. Not passively, not blankly, actively present, reading everything. Deciding continuously that Noah was safe. Deciding it fresh each time, like it wasn't a conclusion carried forward from before, but a choice being made in the moment. "You've been through a lot," Noah told him. "More than I know about, probably." Rex blinked slowly. "You're going to be okay," Noah said. "I know people keep saying that to you. I know it probably doesn't mean as much coming from someone you just met." He paused. "But Reyes is here, and he's not going anywhere. So." Max shifted on the floor and put his head on Noah's boot. Noah looked down at him. 3 years on the force together, and Max had never once done that during a shift. He reached down and put his hand on the dog's side and just left it there. Reyes came in 10 minutes later and sat down on the other side of the table. He looked at Rex for a moment and then said, without looking at Noah, I owe you something I don't know how to pay. You don't owe me anything. I do. He said it with quiet finality. You didn't have to stop last night. You didn't have to stay all night. You didn't have to call Diaz in, or push Thomas to file the hold, or any of the rest of it. You could have filed the report, handed it to animal control, and gone home to sleep. He paused. Most people would have. I'm not most people. No, Reyes said. You're not. He looked up then. Why did you name him Shadow? Noah thought about it. Because when I found him, he'd been invisible. Right there under a road people drove every day and nobody saw him. Nobody stopped. He looked at the dog. A shadow is always there. You just don't always see it. Reyes was quiet for a moment. His real name is Rex, he said. But the name you gave him isn't wrong either. He put his hand on the dog's head. He's been both. He can be both. The door opened. Cole came in, and the look on his face had changed in a way that was hard to define, but immediately readable. Something had moved. Something significant. We have a problem, he said. Noah stood up. What kind? The call that came into the clinic this morning. We traced it. Cole closed the door behind him. It came from a number registered to a burner phone purchased in Columbus 6 weeks ago. We pinged the tower data. He looked at Noah directly. The phone was active in Maplewood last night. It pinged a tower 2 blocks from this clinic at approximately 3 a.m. The room went cold. Someone was here, Reyes said, while Rex was in recovery. Someone was watching, Cole corrected. Which means they knew about the rescue before the call log was even accessible. Which means they were on that road, Noah said. His voice came out lower than he intended. Last night, when I found him. Nobody contradicted that. Noah thought about the darkness under the bridge, the stillness, the way he'd felt something off about the road before Max had even reacted. He had written it off as 2 a.m. nerves and an empty industrial district. He thought about his patrol route, which didn't include that road, and about the fact that he'd diverted onto it on instinct, or because Max had pushed against the window, or because of whatever unnameable combination of things made a person turn left instead of right at 2 in the morning. And he thought about the fact that if he had arrived 20 minutes later, or not at all, there would have been nothing left to find. They left him there to die, Noah said. Most likely, Cole said. A dog that dies under an abandoned bridge is never found, never traced, never becomes a problem for anyone. He paused. But a dog that gets rescued by a police officer and ends up in a veterinary clinic with a chip scan and a federal filing is a very different situation, so now they're nervous. How nervous? Diaz asked from the doorway. Noah hadn't heard him come in. Nervous enough to surveil a clinic at 3 a.m. Cole looked at each of them in turn. I'm requesting local law enforcement presence here overnight. Officer Walker, I'd like you personally on that detail if your supervisor agrees. Diaz said, He agrees. Noah didn't argue. He looked at Rex, at the dog that had been left to disappear, that had pressed its face into a stranger's hand, and held still through something that should have broken it, that had opened its eyes when it heard its name spoken by a voice it hadn't heard in 3 years. He wasn't going anywhere. Cole's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his expression shifted again, sharper this time. The warrant came through, he said. Meridian Group. Callaway's office and storage facility in Cincinnati. Agents are moving now. He looked up. And there's something else. Something the search of Callaway's financial records just turned up. He set his phone on the table so they could see the screen. It was a transaction log. A payment dated 14 months ago made from a Meridian Group subsidiary account to a recipient listed only by a number code. The amount was $11,000. What is that? Reyes asked. That, Cole said, is the payment made to someone to take Rex off Meridian's books, to make him disappear. He looked at Noah. The recipient account traces to a man with a prior conviction for animal abandonment in 2 states. His last known address is 12 miles from the Industrial Road Bridge. The silence in the room was absolute. He was paid to get rid of him, Noah said. Yes? And instead of... Noah stopped. Instead of whatever he was supposed to do, Cole said carefully, he left the dog under a bridge and took the money. He paused. Which means, in a way, that the man who was hired to make Rex disappear permanently is the reason Rex is still alive. Noah looked at the dog. Rex looked back at him with those steady, patient eyes that had seen things none of them in this room would ever fully know. That had waited under that bridge not because it had hope exactly, but because it hadn't stopped yet. Because stopping wasn't in what it was made of. Whoever that man is, Reyes said quietly, I don't know whether to be furious at him or thank him. Noah knew exactly what he meant. He felt both of those things simultaneously and didn't try to choose between them. Outside somewhere in Cincinnati, federal agents were walking through a door. And in a small room in a veterinary clinic in Maplewood, a retired military dog breathed steadily in and out, alive and present, and accounted for. For now, that had to be enough. But the night was still ahead of them, and the person who had stood 2 blocks from this building at 3 a.m. had not been found, had not been identified, was still out there somewhere, knowing exactly where Rex was, and that Noah thought was the part that kept his hand resting on the back of his neck and his eyes moving to the window every few minutes without him meaning to. That was the part that wasn't finished yet. The call came in at 11:52 p.m. Noah was sitting in the hallway outside Rex's room with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, his back against the wall and his eyes on the front entrance, when his phone lit up with Cole's name. He answered before the screen had fully brightened. We have him, Cole said. Noah straightened. Calloway. Calloway, 2 of his associates, and Gerald Fitch, who was apparently at the Cincinnati facility when agents executed the warrant, which tells you how confident he was that nothing was coming. A pause. Also, the man who was paid to dispose of Rex. His name is Marcus Webb. He was picked up at his home about 40 minutes ago. He gave a full statement without being asked twice. What did he say? Cole's voice shifted slightly. Not harder. More careful. He said he was contracted to euthanize the dog off the books. He said he couldn't do it. He'd done a lot of things in his life he wasn't proud of, but he couldn't put down a dog that was just sitting there looking at him like that. A pause. So he drove to the closest deserted area he knew and left him under the bridge. He took the money and told Calloway it was done. Noah closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. He thought about Rex under that bridge for however many days it had been. Days of pain and thirst and silence. He thought about the fact that Webb's inability to follow through on a contract killing was the only reason Rex was alive, and he held both things in his mind at the same time, the horror of it and the strange, crooked mercy of it, and didn't try to simplify either one into something cleaner. What happens to Webb? He asked. He cooperated fully. That'll factor in. Cole paused again. Noah. There's one more thing. The storage facility in Cincinnati. When agents went through it, they found documentation on 11 other dogs. 7 are currently with Meridian clients. 4 are unaccounted for. The Bureau is opening a full investigation into all of them. 11 others. Rex wasn't the end of the story. Rex was the thread that once pulled had started unraveling something much larger than one dog under one bridge on one road in Maplewood. Thank you, Noah said. Thank your dog, Cole said. And he meant it without irony, and they both knew it. And Noah didn't have anything to add to that, so he just said goodnight and sat in the hallway a little while longer with the phone in his hand and the quiet of the clinic pressing in around him. He didn't tell Reyes that night. Reyes was asleep in the chair beside Rex's table, his hand resting on the edge of the surface near the dog's shoulder. Rex was asleep too, his breathing deep and even his hind legs stretched out behind him in the careful, deliberate arrangement of an animal learning to trust that it was safe to fully let go. Noah stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at both of them, and then turned the light off and pulled the door almost closed and let them sleep. Max was waiting for him in the hallway. Of course he was. "Come on," Noah said quietly. "Let's go find somewhere to sit." He told Reyes everything in the morning. Reyes sat across from him at the same break room table where Cole had laid out the warrant information the previous afternoon, and he listened to all of it without interrupting. When Noah finished, Reyes was quiet for a long time. He had both hands wrapped around a coffee mug, and he was looking at the surface of the table between them. 11? He said finally. 11 others. 7 accounted for. 4 still being traced. Reyes nodded slowly. Something moved through his face that was complicated and layered, and went through several things before settling into a kind of quiet, exhausted resolve. "Those 4 dogs have handlers somewhere who are still waiting," he said. "The way I waited." "Yeah. The Bureau is looking. Full investigation. Cole confirmed it this morning." Reyes set the mug down. He looked at Noah directly. "You know none of this happens without what you did 2 nights ago. Not just finding Rex, all of it. The chip scan, the hold, bringing Diaz in the chain of custody, all of it." He stopped. "I've spent 3 years running into walls. And then you turn down a road you don't even patrol and pull a pry bar out of your trunk and—" He stopped again. He pressed his mouth together briefly. "I'm not good at this kind of thing. Saying this kind of thing." "You don't have to," Noah said. "I know. I want to." He met Noah's eyes and held them. "Thank you. For my dog. And for the 11 others, even if you didn't know about them yet." Noah didn't have a clean response to that. He nodded, and they sat for a moment in the kind of silence that didn't need filling. Rex walked that morning for the first time. Not far. 3 steps across the examination room floor, slow and uncertain, his hindquarters swaying with each movement, his concentration absolute. Dr. Thomas stood to the side with her arms crossed, and the quiet, satisfied look of someone watching something work the way it was supposed to. Reyes was on his knees on the floor at Rex's level, both hands out, his voice low and steady. "Come on," Reyes said. "You've got it. Come on." Rex took the 3rd step, and his back left leg buckled slightly, and Reyes's hands were there immediately, not catching him, just steadying, just present, and the dog pushed through it and planted all 4 feet and stood. He stood. He looked at Reyes with those steady brown eyes, and his tail moved not twice this time, not the careful, uncertain arcs of an animal still deciding whether it was allowed to feel good. It moved fully and continuously, the whole back half of him involved in it, the tail going, and his body moving with it, in the unguarded total way of a dog that has stopped calculating the cost of being happy. Reyes made a sound that he immediately covered by clearing his throat and looking at the ceiling. Dr. Thomas turned away and did something at the counter that probably didn't need doing. Noah watched and felt something loosen in his chest that had been pulled tight since 2:17 a.m. 2 days ago. Some tension that had been so constant, he'd stopped noticing it releasing all at once now, like a rope being let go. Max from his corner wagged once. Economical. Approving. Sergeant Diaz came by at noon with 2 things: a formal commendation letter from the Department for the Rescue and Animal Welfare Actions, and a bag of sandwiches from the place on 5th Street that Noah liked and had never mentioned to Diaz, which meant Diaz had asked someone, which was perhaps the most touching thing about the entire interaction. "The commendation goes in your file," Diaz said, dropping it on the break room table. "The sandwiches go in your stomach. You look like you haven't eaten since Tuesday." "It's Thursday." "I know what day it is, Walker." Noah picked up the letter and read it. It was formal and carefully worded in the bureaucratic language these things always used. But buried in the 3rd paragraph, Diaz had added a line that wasn't standard language. Noah recognized it because it sounded like Diaz, and not like a form. It said, "Officer Walker's decision to remain with the animal through the night and his subsequent actions in coordinating with federal authorities reflected the highest standard of what this department asks of its officers. which meant it reflected the highest standard of what Diaz asked of himself, and Noah understood that. He folded the letter carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. "The Bureau wants to talk to you next week," Diaz said. "Formally, about the Meridian case. You'll be a witness of record." "I know." "Also, there's a reporter from the Maplewood Gazette who's been calling the department since this morning. Someone leaked the basic outline of the story." Diaz looked at him steadily. "You don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to." "What would you do?" Diaz considered this briefly. "I'd let Reyes talk. It's his story more than it's yours. You're the one who found the dog. He's the one who lost him. People need to hear both parts." That was, Noah thought, exactly right. The reporter came 2 days later, a young woman named Carrie Yates, who asked good questions and listened carefully and didn't try to make the story into something simpler than it was. She interviewed Noah for 40 minutes, and Reyes for over an hour, and Dr. Thomas for 20. She asked if she could photograph Rex, and Reyes said yes, and the photograph that ran on the front page of the Gazette 3 days later was Rex standing on all 4 legs in the examination room, with Reyes's hand on his shoulder and his tail in motion. The caption read, "3 years lost. 2 days to come home." Cole called Noah the following Tuesday. The FBI had located 2 of the 4 unaccounted dogs from Meridian's records. One was in the custody of a private security contractor in Indiana. The other had been transferred to a kennel in Kentucky under a false name. Both were alive. Handlers were being notified. The other 2 were still being traced. "We'll find them," Cole said. "I know," Noah said. He said it like he meant it, because he did. 3 weeks after Rex walked across the examination room floor for the first time, he walked out of the Maplewood Veterinary Emergency Clinic on his own 4 legs and got into the passenger seat of Reyes's truck. Not the back seat. The passenger seat, because Reyes had opened that door, and Rex had made his preference clear without ambiguity, and Reyes had laughed the first time Noah had heard him laugh, a real laugh, unguarded and sudden, and it changed his whole face. Noah stood in the parking lot with Max beside him and watched the truck idle. Reyes lowered the window. "You have my number," he said. "I have your number. Use it, not just for case updates." Noah nodded. Reyes looked at him for a moment, and then at Max, and then he said something that Noah didn't expect. "Whatever comes next for you," he said, "you're going to be good at it. You already are." Noah didn't know what to do with that except hold it. So he held it. The truck pulled out of the lot. Rex's head appeared in the passenger window, ears forward, watching Noah until the truck turned onto the main road and was gone. Max pressed against Noah's leg. Noah looked down at him. The dog looked back up with the steady, patient attention that Noah had been on the receiving end of for 3 years, and that he had never quite understood the full weight of until 2 nights ago on a dark industrial road, when that same attention had been directed at a window and a dog that hadn't been found yet. "You knew," Noah said. Max blinked. "Before I stopped the car. Before I even heard anything. You knew." Max sat down on Noah's boot, same as he'd done in the clinic room. The same deliberate, quiet act of placement, of saying, "I am here, and I know where here is, and here is where I want to be." Noah stood there, in the parking lot, in the early November cold, and thought about a dog wedged under a bridge that no one used, waiting without knowing for how many days whether anyone was coming. He thought about a soldier driving empty roads at night for 3 years because he couldn't stop. He thought about 11 other dogs and the 4 that were still out there somewhere, and the handlers who didn't know yet that someone was looking, that someone had found the thread that things were moving. He thought about the letter in his jacket pocket and the pry bar in the trunk of his cruiser, and the way Rex had pressed its face into his palm before it had any reason to trust him. Some things you cannot plan for. Some things you can only be ready for. Ready in the way that has nothing to do with training or preparation, and everything to do with whether you will stop the car. When every reasonable instinct says, keep driving. Whether you will stay through the night when no one asked you to. Whether you will pick up the pry bar and keep working when your hands are bleeding and the concrete isn't moving. Noah Walker had stopped the car. He had stayed the night. He had kept working. And because he had a dog that was left to disappear, was alive. A soldier who had been running out of reasons to keep looking had found what he'd been looking for. A federal investigation had opened that might bring home 4 more dogs whose handlers were still sitting with the particular grief of not knowing. None of it was small. All of it had started with Max slamming his paws against a window at 2 in the morning on a road that Noah hadn't planned to drive down. He reached down and put his hand on Max's head. "Good dog," he said. And that was the whole truth of it. Simple and complete and entirely sufficient. A good dog had told a good man to stop. And the good man had listened. And because of that, nothing that came after would ever be the same.